Every 7 years, a house on Willowbrook Street empties overnight. Now, it's Jessica's turn, and she has less time than she thinks. The empty house syndrome. Rain had been falling since morning, and by evening, the Melbourne suburbs lay drowned in a murky silver haze. On quiet Willowbrook Street, lamplight blurred into amber pools in the puddles, while the wind drove wet leaves across the asphalt, plastering them against fences. House number 17 stood a little apart from the others, with a dark attic window and a peeling white gate that squeaked at every gust. Behind the thin living room curtains, a soft light flickered. Inside, everything was warm and orderly. 2 mugs on the kitchen table still steamed. On their surface, a thin film of condensation formed into a shape resembling 7. Jessica absent-mindedly wiped it away with her finger, and it vanished like a mirage. Beside them, a kettle still let off wisps of steam. A yellow sticky note on the refrigerator read, "Viewing with J. Hart, 9 o'clock." In the living room, an old wall clock ticked slowly and unevenly. On the back metal plate, exposed by a draft, a tiny engraving could be seen, Harkness, 7. In the children's room, a moon-shaped lamp glowed. A toy railway stopped abruptly at a bend, where a little train waited for a guiding hand. It all looked as though life had been going on here just seconds ago, but the house was empty. No footsteps, no voices, only the heavy, ringing absence of sound. At 2:17 a.m., a faint chime rolled through the house, 7 short notes, as though a bell deep in the walls was answering something. In different rooms, clocks showed slightly different times, off by seconds. In the corner of the living room, a cold patch spread across the carpet, as if an icy draft had slipped in, though the windows were shut tight. In the morning, a silver car with a real estate agency logo pulled up outside. Jessica Hart, a realtor with 10 years' experience, climbed the porch steps and went in. Her eyes caught on the basement stairwell. There, folded in half, lay an old sheet of paper, its edges yellowed. On one side, in crooked letters, "Don't play downstairs." On the other, a charcoal mark, 8 times 7. Rain kept drumming on the roof. Jessica looked up toward the dark attic window, and for a moment thought something moved behind the glass. 3 days after the Peterson family vanished, Jessica was already preparing the house for sale. The police were still officially investigating, but everything had stalled in neat phrases. No signs of forced entry, possible voluntary departure. At the agency office, she went through the archive of sales contracts for Willowbrook Street. The transaction dates for number 17 formed a precise 7-year cycle. But in one old copy of the neighborhood map tucked into the file, an ink note marked a crooked perpendicular 7 near house number 23. Tax records also showed that number 23 was about to change owners. It looked like the obvious next target. That evening, she drove to the street. At number 17's gate, she was met by Mr. Collins, a gray-browed elderly neighbor with a cane. He tapped it on the asphalt 7 times, paused, and only then spoke. "Iron to the house, copper to memory," he said, bending to place a rusty nail and a copper coin under his own doorstep. Through his half-open door, Jessica saw a framed photograph of a young woman smiling in a summer garden. The caption under it read, "Ellie, 7 years ago." Jessica returned to number 17. Everything was just as before, But now the fine dust on the windowsills told her no one had been inside since her last visit. In the dust on the floor, tiny handprints, like those of a child, led to the fireplace and vanished into it. Late that night, she started a separate logbook, split into 2 tracks. 1. Node House. Hypothesis: the anomaly is tied to a specific address. 2. Line Carrier. Hypothesis: the disappearances follow a person, not a place. The entry with the map copy and number 23's tax data she marked as a potential false vector, or a trap set by someone who knew about the cycle. The next day, Jessica went to the local history museum, a low brick building with stained glass windows, smelling of old paper and floor wax. She was looking for any mention of number 17 and events on Willowbrook Street. Behind the counter worked Mr. Allen, a wiry man in thin-rimmed glasses. Hearing the address, he paused, then said quietly, "My great-grandfather worked those mines. Disappeared in 1892, right during the 7th activation. This is all we have left of him." He took a small copper token from his pocket, engraved with pound 17, and handed it to her. The metal was worn, but warm to the touch. "The family holds on to the number," he added. "Sometimes it's all we have left." Allen led her into a room of archival maps. Under glass lay yellow diagrams from the 19th century gold rush. He switched on a UV lamp, and lines of mine tunnels glowed, converging beneath number 17. The legend read, "Pound, vein rupture. Number, activation count." In the margin, someone had penciled, "TMX equals 2,555 days, the span between stress peaks in the gold-bearing rock." Jessica quickly took a photo of the fragment. "These shafts are cut into the vein," Allen explained. "When the stress peaks, gold acts like a waveguide. It conducts not just light and heat, but time." He pointed to the house's blueprint. "And you know what else? The stone it's built from came from the Harkness quarry, same seam as the tunnels. Houses like that become resonators. They amplify whatever passes through the vein." Back at number 17, Jessica went down into the basement. In her flashlight beam, the far corner of the stonework shimmered with a golden tint. She ran her hand over a rough seam, feeling a faint pulse, an echo of what was coming at the next activation. Knowing time was short, Jessica decided to check the tunnels herself. She contacted Thomas Grayson, a local historian, and persuaded him to join her. Thomas, tall with a thick beard, met her by an old hatch at the edge of the park, 2 blocks from Willowbrook Street. "This entrance isn't on any modern map," he said, sliding the heavy cover aside. Damp and metal hit their noses. They descended with flashlights. Jessica tied a pendulum line, a thin cord with a weight, at the entrance to detect time shifts. Every few meters, she set small noise beacons emitting an intermittent tone to guide their way back. The deeper they went, the quieter it became. Soon, all the beacons fell silent, and the air filled with a steady, low 7th tone that smothered speech, making it impossible to utter even simple words. On the walls appeared children's drawings, houses, trees, human figures. When they passed and then returned the same way, the drawings had changed. Some now showed scenes from Jessica's own life, at her desk, as a child with her mother. And in every corner was the .7 mark. In a narrow passage, they stopped at a beam with the same .7 stenciled on it. "Threshold mark," Thomas said, tracing the faded paint. Soon, something glittered in the dust. Thomas picked up a small shard of quartz with fine gold threads. Jessica held it in her palm, and at that instant the pendulum line quivered and both their watches showed 2:17, though the real time was different. "This will be your anchor," Thomas said. Jessica tucked the shard into a separate pocket of her backpack. She already knew, when the cycle activated, this stone might keep her from vanishing entirely. Each day, Jessica felt time around her growing denser. She now had a clear plan: memory anchor, record everything, autonomous drone launch to the museum roof where Alan could retrieve the data. She turned No. 17 into a field lab. In every room she installed cameras with independent power. On her desk sat a drone, programmed to take off and land directly on the museum roof. The audio loop was prepared separately. Voices and names of all known vanished, including Ellie, the woman from Collins's photo. These sounds would serve as a grounding noise, tying her to reality. One evening, Collins came to her house. In his hands was a small box containing an old spring from a Harkness wall clock. "I've kept this for years," he said quietly. "Work it into the circuit. Iron holds its shape even when time breaks." 2 days before the date, Thomas brought his analysis results. "Everything points to No. 23, he said, spreading out papers. "If the calculations are right, you're safe." Jessica studied the map for a long time. Overlaying the old plans and construction material data, she saw that disappearances always followed the owner of a house built from Harkness quarry stone. The resonator carrier was the target, which meant the node had already shifted to her. That evening, Thomas lingered at the door. "If you stay, the world goes on. If you go in, things might change." "Might is enough," Jessica replied. That night, she checked the cameras, fixed the spring into the counter-ritual chain, and put the quartz shard in her pocket. The drone was ready. All she had to do now was wait for the 7th day. Midnight entered the house quietly but tangibly, as if the air had grown heavier. The sound outside vanished, replaced by the steady, low 7th tone that drowned out all else. The floor beneath her feet began to subtly slide toward the basement, as if local gravity pulled her to where the tunnels met under the house. Jessica inhaled deeply, quartz shard in one hand, drone remote in the other. At 2:16, she approached the old clock and began turning the hands backward. The mechanism clicked slowly until it froze at the peak, 2:17. At the same time, she started the audio loop of vanished names, Ellie's among them. Voices filled the space, interlaced with rustles, forming a dense wall of sound. Before stepping toward the basement, Jessica launched the drone. Its blades chopped the damp air, and it lifted into the night. She looked into one of the cameras and said quietly but clearly, "Don't go into the tunnels. Raise your anchors." The 7th tone grew stronger. Walls and furniture began to blur, floor lines seeming to flow toward the center of the house. She stepped forward, and everything thickened, as if in heavy water. Suddenly, on one of the drone's live feeds, Jessica appeared, but in a different place. A long corridor with gold-threaded walls that hadn't been on her route. She was walking slowly, holding the anchor with both hands, the light not from a flashlight, but from the stone itself. Seconds later, the image cut out. The house cameras recorded for only a moment longer. The logs showed conflicting timestamps, 2:17, 4:02, and 23:59 on the same day. The cycle had faltered. The basement was empty again, the tone gone. But in the device's memory remained proof that Jessica had crossed the threshold and changed something in the loop's mechanism. 6 months later, Willowbrook Street lay once more under rainy haze. Liam Carter, a young real estate agent, sat in his car across from number 17. It was his first solo listing. The file read, "Vacant, ready for sale, keys in office." He stepped out into the drizzle and walked up the path to the peeling white gate. On the porch hung an old doorbell. When Liam touched the for sale sign, the bell rang 8 times, steady with pauses, as though counting something new, a light signal that the cycle had shifted. In the hallway, on the floor by the wall, lay a metal container. Inside, a flash drive and a neatly folded sheet with an anchoring diagram. In the corner, X72. That evening, Liam brought the find to Mr. Allen. Seeing the flash drive, Allen paled. When he opened the single video file, Jessica appeared. In her hands were the quartz shard and the copper token engraved X7. Allen leaned closer to the screen, his voice firm. "That's my great-grandfather's token. I know where the second threshold is." Next to Jessica in the frame was a tunnel map with 2 marked points. In the corner, a timer read 6 years, 364 days, the seconds twitching, sometimes freezing, sometimes skipping. Outside, at his own house, Mr. Collins stood in the rain and tapped his cane 6 times, paused, then added one more. His face was grim. He knew the order had changed. Back in his car, Liam noticed that on the fogged window, someone had left an X and a smeared 8. Before the recording cut, over the background noise came Jessica's faint, distorted voice. "I'm holding the anchor."